Welcome back. So for the next session, also a short session, 30 minutes, we'd like to welcome Rakesh, Ranjan, and Ben Bailey, Director of Programs at Mission to Seafarers, who will be discussing seafarer recruitment fees. And we hope there will be some time for questions as well. Thank you.
This is more conversational, so I'm just trying to find the best posture for me to start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very important session, I think. And if you are thinking you are not connected with this issue, I request you to pay attention for next 20-25 minutes. You will feel you are part of this entire conversation. And I cannot think of anyone else better than Ben Bailey. He's Director of Operations from Director of Programs from Mission to Seafarers. So we'll try to discuss something, a topic which is very important. From IHRB, we have a shipping and oceans program. We work on seafarers recruitment fee. We have been working on this issue since last almost a decade now, and most of our work has been around looking into seafarers recruitment fee and connecting with the stakeholders, especially business, on this. So before I give you a brief overview of the issue, I request Ben if you can tell us more about his work and also Mission to Seafarers.
Thank you. And hello, everybody. It's really good to be with you again this year. So the Mission to Seafarers is one of the world's largest providers of port-based welfare services. We work in 200 ports across 50 countries. And this year, we're celebrating our 170th anniversary. So we were founded in the UK, and we exist, we're connected to the Church of England, but we exist to support seafarers and their families through a variety of different pathways. So in an average year, we will probably board around 30 to 40,000 merchant vessels across the world, and we'll support around 400,000 to 500,000 seafarers and their families through a variety of pathways. That can be anything from sort of basic mental health and well-being, right the way through to supporting them should they have been abandoned or they have some other kind of labor abuse that they need support for.
Thank you, Ben. And if I can briefly discuss about the persistent challenge we all face about recruitment fee. So IHRB has done 2 rounds of surveys in 2023 and 2024. We did this survey in collaboration with Turtle. Turtle is a maritime recruitment platform. They are ethical recruitment platform. So very interesting. I'll share some data from that survey. It talks about out of the responses we received, 31% of seafarers they have been asked to pay the recruitment fee, and among this 31%, 74% actually paid the fees. And very interestingly, and this is something we all need to think about, among those workers, those seafarers who paid the fees, 80% of them never complained about the payment. So the persistence and the reality of recruitment fee among seafarers is this much. And if I briefly give you some data around the amount of that recruitment fee, this can be any amount, to be very honest. And many of the workers we discussed, we talked with, they mentioned they have paid more than 10,000 US dollars for a job at sea. If you think about 10,000, that's like they may not be earning $10,000 in their entire contract period, but they pay this much of amount. And to be very honest, and slightly, if we can differentiate between workers, land-based workers and seafarers, for seafarers, we have Maritime Labor Convention 2006. MLC is a very important convention for any country, and currently this MLC has been adopted by more than 100 countries. Let's say example, Malaysia, India, Philippines, everyone has ratified MLC. And MLC very clearly mentioned the workers should not be paying for anything other than 3 mandatory documents which make them qualify to get the job, which is like passport, sailor's book, or their capacity development, their training program, which they have to do to become eligible to be a seafarer. So this creates lots of dependence, lots of sociological, socioeconomic impact. Families suffer. They have to take a loan. In fact, when we were discussing last year with 2 seafarers, they mentioned they have to sell their jewelry, sell their land, sell their property. And this creates a vicious cycle of poverty for them. It's not something, it's like one time. It's like a regular impact they have. And after that also they face lots of problems. So if I can start with our discussion, if I can ask first question, we often talk about these fees, and uh, sometimes like we all know workers are paying, but this also a reality. Sometimes cost may not always appear as clear placement fee. This may be hidden in different parts of the recruitment processes. Sometimes they pay before they even reach the recruitment placement agency. So from your work with seafarers, where are the main recruitment cost risks appearing today? And if I quickly add, where do these costs typically arise in the recruitment journey?
Well, as you say, there is international legislation which is supposed to protect seafarers, and I think, certainly by and large, in the top tiers of the industry, it probably does. As you also say, though, these kind of charges come at any particular time, but particularly at the start. So when the seafarers are looking for the job in the first place. And as you said, many of them will be expected to pay something, and that could just be a small administration charge. We've had stories of seafarers who've told us that they've handed over all of their documentation to be photocopied, to be registered, to be scanned, etc. And then in order to get that documentation back, the administrator will say to them, well, look, you can get it back undamaged if you give me $100 or if you give me $50 or whatever it might be. And I'm sure in many of your wider sectors that, those types of stories will be very familiar. But equally for those seafarers who are looking to get that job, it's worth remembering that for the average salary that a seafarer earns, they are supporting up to 14 members of their family and their extended family. That's particularly true in the Philippines. And so, families will club together. They will send kind of the brightest and the best to maritime school to then go on to have a career at sea. And so there is a significant pressure on that individual. And if they can't get the job, then it's very common, sadly, in certain parts of the world where a local agent will say, well, if you go to the end of the road and there is a bank there and there is a favorable rate for seafarers wanting loans, etc., and they will then take out a loan at an extortionate rate of interest, compounded, of course, and then that seafarer will start the job already in significant amounts of debt, and obviously that gets worse if something should happen whilst they're on that journey.
Thank you, Ben. In fact, when we had workshop with some of the seafarers, and we had workshop with the MTS in 2024-25, and we had discussion with a number of seafarers, and most of the seafarers talks about they pay before they even know where exactly they are paying. Sometimes they pay to their relatives also, sometimes to their friends, and they may not be even part of the recruitment chain. They are somewhere else. And in fact, I was also trying to understand from MTS work with families and the family support work you do. And most of these seafarers, they take loan and leave. And most of the households suffer because of these recruitment fee. So if I can bring this issue, why, like, we need to understand this, and from your work, from your MTS work with households and families, what impacts these recruitment costs have on families, households? especially when they borrow these loans?
Yeah, well, as I say, for many families that are sending seafarers to a career in the maritime industry, it's more a kind of family economic strategy rather than, particularly. I mean, obviously there are some seafarers that have a love of the ocean, about seeing the world, and all that other kind of good stuff that goes with the excitement of working at sea. But for other seafarers, it's an absolute decision in order to support their families. And I've lost count the number of times over the last 20 years that I've been working in this space that seafarers have said to me, I'm doing this because I don't want my children to have to do and spend up to a year away from home and not necessarily have any shore leave, and absolutely potentially run the risk of being abandoned or find some other form of exploitation, or be, caught up in some kind of geopolitical event. So the pressure on the family is very, very real. We often, as I say, have families that will come to us seeking support because if a ship has been abandoned and there is a loan that's been taken out, then, those loan payments don't stop. And, sometimes the families don't even know how much debt the seafarer has got themselves into in order to be able to go to sea. So the pressure on that family, in addition to, I suppose you could say, the everyday issues of the isolation, family, seafarers missing birthdays, funerals, all those other kind of social events and social milestones of life can be a very real and a very trying circumstance for them and for their loved ones, particularly when you're dealing with such a large extended family as they are.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you also bringing for the issue of abandonment. And I understand now this is one of the very important issue we are facing today. And I was looking for some data yesterday when I was preparing for this session. And in fact, in the last 10 years, 1,300 ships have been abandoned. More than 1,300 ships have been abandoned. And in 2025 alone, 410 ships have been abandoned as per ITF data, and 6,000 seafarers abandoned in total globally. And like very connected to what I do in my profession also. Among these 1,000 seafarers are only from India. So 1,000 Indians, almost like 18% of seafarers. And most of these things are, as it reflects, is around GCC, Gulf also. So I would like to bring your work around Gulf also and around abandonment also. Because I was looking at data, highest is Turkey, by the way, it's like 61 ships are abandoned in Turkey, but the UAE is 54 and Saudi Arabia is 21, followed by Egypt. India is also there with 16, I think ships are abandoned there. So from a responsible recruitment and due diligence perspective, looking from what should companies do to identify abandonment risk earlier, and how can companies ensure that seafarers are not left without wages, support, or repatriation?
There's no doubt that seafarer abandonment is now at a crisis level across the industry. So as you've just heard those numbers, 2023, there was around 130 odd cases of abandonment. Last year, there's 410. The numbers are getting worse and worse and worse every year. And I think already we're on kind of track, for want of a better term, that records will be broken again this year. And it is extremely, extremely disturbing. For many of the seafarers that we support across particularly the GCC, so we have an agreement that we work with the Federal Transport Authority in the United Arab Emirates, and we provide a lot of support to those seafarers who are quite literally left on board ships without food, without water, without oil to run their generators. It's warm here, it's even hotter in the UAE, and it's only going in one direction in terms of the temperature. We will be sending food out to those ships, we'll be sending water out to those ships and oil to try and keep the generators running. And of course, we work very closely with the International Transport Workers Federation, etc. Many of those types of vessels, and sadly we are seeing it, these types of abandonments happen in pockets, geographical pockets. And so, yes, the Middle East generally, and particularly in the Gulf, is a problem. But there are, over 120, 130 cases, I think, at the moment in Europe, 60 of which are in Turkish waters. And so, these are very often not ships necessarily that will be going from, say, Singapore to Southampton. They may often be dealing on fairly localized routes. So the challenge for companies particularly is not necessarily to, it's not to forget that just because you are, transporting cargo from Singapore to Jebel Ali and Dubai, you then have a responsibility to audit that chain to ensure that when your cargo is then decanted onto feeder vessels, then of course, making sure that those seafarers are properly supported. Looking at the flag of the vessel, there are certain flags, flag registries, which ships are come under that international legislation when they're sailing. And of course, we have seen in the last couple of years the rise of fake registries. In addition to what's widely known as the so-called shadow fleet, where these vessels are operating internationally, but often they're under sanction, but they're operating without proper insurance, without proper safety checks, without a proper due diligence. And so there's a real risk there for companies to ensure that their cargoes are not being transported on those vessels, but also that they're trying wherever possible to understand the seafarers working on those ships and what the risks might be. The other thing I would say is that certainly from my experience in the Gulf is that many seafarers, and you highlight that many of them are disproportionately from India and Pakistan, they knowingly and willingly choose to work on these vessels. So they know from their perspective, it's easier for them to get a job. They may have paid to get that job, but they know that they won't be up against as much international competition for other jobs that are available. And so for us, a lot of it is actually working with those seafarers and their families to show them what good looks like. And of course, you've done a lot of work in that area at the IHRB, and so has the Sustainable Shipping Initiative and others. And it's really important that we try and give seafarers the tools to be able to make better decisions for themselves.
Actually, and then the issue of dark fleets and all these ghost ships and the issue has become very important today, also because of this ongoing conflict. And I also wanted to bring if I am like understanding these conflicts from seafarers' perspective, there is a chain of vulnerability when these kind of conflicts started. So basically, we are talking about seafarers who are already debt-ridden. Then sometimes they choose these dark fleets. Sometimes they choose these like problematic ships where like their license problem and all the issues. And then eventually they get abandoned, and then the chances of abandonment further increases because of these crises and conflicts. So I'm just trying to understand from you, if I have to look into companies' role in that, and how should companies or a crewing agency and other maritime actors can strengthen their duty of care during these conflicts, especially considering the heightened security situations.
Yeah, everybody knows how difficult it has been, particularly with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz of recent months. And there have been around 20,000 seafarers that have been stranded in the Arabian Gulf since the crisis began, around 10,000 of whom kind of live and work in and around that region on a permanent basis. It's been actually pretty remarkable, I think, to see that for those more international types of vessels, we've seen a far greater level of care and due diligence by those major ship owners and by cargo owners particularly. I've had several of them contact me over the time asking what more they should be doing. And many of those seafarers that are working on the international vessels, they were able to do crew change. And in most cases, certainly off the coast of the UAE, food was going out, and stores were still being provisioned, etc. Salaries were still being paid. My fear now, as we sort of enter this even more, I would say, to some extent, unsettled period where, one day the straits might be opening, ships might be able to leave. The next minute, we're seeing that they're being attacked or, they're collateral because of missiles falling out of the sky, etc. That sort of on-off approach is potentially going to lead to more abandonments and more risk. Particularly in sort of the lower tiers of the industry. I always kind of say semi-jokingly that, my job involves dealing with the good, the bad, and the very bad. And I think to some extent at this moment, I'm particularly worried about the very bad elements of the industry because there will be some owners and actors that are specifically operating in certain regions who will just decide to walk away. And the implication on those seafarers, and as I say, many of them are just stranded with nothing, will be very, very severe indeed.
I do agree with you. And then responsibility prospects, and then also looking at some of the initiatives we can bring in to support seafarers. And I would like to bring here, IHRB has recently launched a toolkit to support ship owners and how they can provide better protection to seafarers and how they can avoid these instances of recruitment fee payment. So if I can quickly share with you about the toolkit which we have developed. I request everyone if you can scan the QR code. This is very simple four web pages. You can go there. It's very, in a very brief manner, it mentions 5 steps for businesses to adopt to protect workers, to support workers, and also to avoid any instances of recruitment fee payment in their supply chain. So this is the website. I request all of you to kindly go through it. Ben, if I can again bring in this issue about tools and guidance is usually we all provide to seafarers and the companies. For example, IHRB is this toolkit, or ITF has a guidance, or Crew Connect, RightShip. RightShip has also guidances. MSCN had different materials. ICE1 has some guidances also. So how these tools and guidances can be used by businesses to protect workers?
Well, obviously, we're looking at trying to provide a framework and some space where there are these questions. I've been very surprised, I suppose, and I shouldn't be after 20 years, just still how unknown and invisible the maritime industry and therefore the seafarer is to the world. It's very easy if you're off the coast of Singapore to look out and you see hundreds and hundreds of ships. But of course, on every single ship, there could be 20 people. And so we see ships, we don't necessarily see people. And one of our big messages is always not to forget the human and the people that are working on board those vessels and to understand the risks that they have. So there can never be enough guidance, I think, is probably what I would say. And certainly toolkits like the one that IHRB have produced does provide that space and that framework for companies to start asking those questions. But I think the overriding message of that, though, in all of these types of guidances is not just to take an agent's word for it, not just to take a ship owner's self-assessment as word for it. We've done a lot of work in recent years with IKEA, and they have come to our centres, for example. They've gone out ship visiting with us. They've spent time listening and meeting seafarers and really trying to understand what issues they face. Dan and the team at Verite, they came to our center in Baltimore last year and spent more time. And I think just making sure that we have space to hear a worker's voice, that's a real powerful moment. And something which I think, for all the guidance that is there, which is absolutely vitally important, we have to also, as part of that, include the voice of the migrant worker, and in this case, the seafarer.
I do agree. And then for this toolkit, I request everyone to review it. And also, if you are willing to know more about this, you can contact us. You can let us know your observation, your inputs. I always ask this question to all the panelists, and I have same question to you also.
Don't.
So, if a company wants to act immediately, what are the first practical steps it should take after reviewing this toolkit? What should be the first practical steps?
Number one is recognize that seafarers are carrying your cargo. I know it sounds obvious, but considering what I said about 3 minutes ago, we have to remember that seafarers are not like airline workers. When any of us are standing in immigration waiting to get our passport stamps and we see, cabin crew just come by and they swan past and they jump the queue and they go straight through. That is not like that for seafarers. In most cases, they arrive in ports which are pretty hostile. They're certainly very inhospitable. And there are certainly risks that can be presented or that present themselves when they are in that space. So really understanding that there are workers carrying your cargo and mapping that journey. Where do they come from? Who is the agent? Is the ship owner, a big responsible owner which is actually doing all of its own recruitment, is doing all of its own management? Or actually, is it one ship owner that may own, 30 or 40 ships, but that has then been chartered out to another company? The crew are then being chartered by another company, and so making sure that you properly understand who the various actors are involved in the deal and involved in the transportation. And also making sure that you have an opportunity to look at those contracts, understanding whether or not it's a vessel that's covered by the IBF and has an ITF agreement on board it, for example, a union agreement, where of course there is better protection for those seafarers, and if something goes drastically wrong, then of course the ITF can and will step in. And I think I would just say again, don't underestimate the opportunity of asking the people on board. Don't expect them necessarily to tell you everything that you want to know immediately. I've lost count again the number of times I've stood in front of seafarers and asked 100 questions, and they look at me like I'm an alien, and they don't necessarily want to answer anything because they don't necessarily have that trust immediately. But working through third parties like ourselves, like Stella Maris, like iSwan, like all the other agencies that do what we do, we can go in and ask those questions on your behalf. And I have to say, again, the number of companies that have said, if only we'd known, then actually we would have taken different steps. And they've now factored in the responses they get from seafarers as part of their chartering or as part of their contracting arrangements. So it's really, really important. And there are a number of things that you can do, which obviously are set out in the toolkit behind me.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So I have a minute or two. I'll quickly mention about one initiative, and I think that may interest to companies and also stakeholders in the room. IHRB has recently established something called Action Group to eliminate recruitment fees from the supply chain. So do let us know if you want to know more about the Action Group. We have a number of companies as a participant of the Action Group. This is very informal space for companies to take part, to connect with us. Some of the participants of Action Group are in the room, but also if you want to know more, you can anytime write to us. MTS and IHRB, we both are part of that Action Group. We'll be very happy to provide any information and support you need. So, Ben, coming back to you, this was very helpful, very informative. We learned a lot. I think one message is very much very clearly coming out from this discussion is the recruitment fee is not something uh, you can easily understand or easily come to know about after you just talk with any if you are talking with only agency or only one stakeholders, that the things the cost may be hidden, the fees are hidden. You need to go through the entire supply chain. You need to understand the hidden cost, pre-recruitment cost. Then only we can know exactly what is the intensity, what is the amount, and how much actually workers are paying. And a very practical solution is we consider that seafarers and workers have paid recruitment fee, and then eliminate people who have remove those people who have not paid. So under considering there is a payment of recruitment fee in the supply chain is very basic and very necessary understanding or consideration we should have. So thank you, Ben, for your time, and I hope it was very helpful for others. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Ben and Rakesh, for this very grounding session. We are now going to break for lunch, so you have an hour, and we'll meet back here right at 1:30 for our last three sessions of the day. And then we'll also have a workshop led by Julia and Carmen on disability. So we'll actually be talking about disability a little bit this afternoon for the first time at the forum, rights of migrant workers with disability. And then Julia and Carmen will lead a workshop on AI, risks around recruitment and AI. So we hope to see you back in 1 hour. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.